everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. To all of you, those of you on the call, a very warm welcome to you. My name is Crispin. I'm with Boundless Leadership, which is a part of Boundless Wisdom. And we're really passionate about all things leadership. And so we have a deep understanding of the challenges that leaders face these days and how tough it really is. And so we come alongside leaders in different ways, and we encourage them, support them, enable them, elevate them. One of the ways we do that is through our wisdom guides, and we'll tell you a little bit about that a little later. And the other way we do that is through this kind of episode, our Leaders in Conversations platform. And what we are aiming to achieve with our Leaders in Conversation platform is really to create a space for leaders to tell their story. And two very special leaders today that I'll be introducing to you in a second. And for those of us on the call, really just sorry, just to interrupt myself. Every time I think and I close my eyes and I think of what we're doing, I see the picture of those of us on the call sitting on the floor at the feet of these two incredible leaders that we're going to learn so much from this evening. And so as we support leaders through just having these conversations, I'd like to encourage you to say hello to us in the chat box, post comments and questions and thoughts. We are recording the session, and we will be sending it out to everybody who registered and have not been able to attend. But please engage with us, and if there's something specific you'd like to put onto the agenda, onto the table, or into the conversation, please do that. Before I introduce Desiree and Melvin, I just want to tell you a quick story. Towards the end of last year, I was having coffee with a very special person, and he gifted me with this tie. It really is a beautiful tie. And I've been waiting for the right opportunity to wear it. And this evening is that opportunity. And so he's on the call tonight. Melvin, thank you for gifting me with this tie. And the reason I'm telling you all on the call this story is that's where this evening's episode was born. That's where we started having the first of these conversations about hope, about leadership, about the realities of leaders in the education space, which is what we'll be focusing on this evening. And so, Melvin, I'm really excited with you and Desiree to present and just to have this evening as a culmination of something that started 7 months ago. And thank you too for your contribution in making this evening possible. So yeah, one of my favorite, us guys have favorite socks and favorite other things, and this is going to be one of my favorite ties. So thank you, Melvin. So let me introduce our two guests this evening. The first is Dr. Desiree Christian. Desiree, I'm going to give you an opportunity to say hello to everybody and just tell us a little bit about yourself in a second. And thank you that you actually sacrificed a public holiday to meet with us and start shaping what this evening is. I really, really do appreciate that. And the other person is soon to be, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Melvin Dirksen. Is that right, Melvin? You almost
still a few mountains to scale before I get to that title.
Fantastic. So, Melvin, Desiree, thank you so much for contributing to this evening. I'm super excited just to sit and listen and learn from you as two people who are in the trenches of education, in the trenches of what it is that you are doing. But in my engagement with both of you, I've left feeling a sense of hope and a sense of purpose and a sense of, wow, there's something more that we can do. And so I'm really privileged and honored to have you as our guest this evening. So I'm going to ask you to say hello to everybody. Just tell us a little bit about yourselves. And then I'm going to hook a question to your introduction, please. And the question is, given where you find yourself at the moment, and the work you're doing and your leadership role that you're playing, how would you define courageous leadership? What does it mean for you? As I said, in the reality that you find yourselves in at the moment. And maybe that's a good way to start, just getting that context and that understanding. Desiree, happy for you to kick off for us and say hello and a little bit about
Sure.
yourself, please.
Hi, good evening, everybody. So I'm a passionate school teacher. Spending time in the classroom is, I think it's my home. It's where I belong. And I'm really honored and a little in awe of the gentleman I'm sharing this platform with. And I'm grateful for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so
So I have
much.
to say, when it comes to courageous leadership, I don't think I had a clue what it was until I started working as a circuit manager. I was working with principals from previously disadvantaged areas, and suddenly you see a whole different life and a different way of being. And I realized just how fortunate I had been, because many of these people that I worked with, these principals, giants, wonderful, wonderful people, regardless of the context of their schools or the commitment or lack of commitment, I should say, of the learners, the lack of commitment of the teachers. They were there every day, just tackling all the issues. They face adversity on a daily basis in so many different ways. Limited resources. Many of them have what they call clunky schools. Teachers who work just for the salary, so they don't move, they just stay where they are, and we can't get rid of them. High absenteeism of teachers and of learners, and they've got to deal with that, and they've got to please explain when learners don't pass or when systemic results come back and they are poor. Violence from gang activity, poverty, all the socio-economic ills that come with it. A serious lack of parental involvement. Currently, the school that I'm at, I actually made the comment to our teachers this morning, for most of the parents, we're actually a daycare center rather than a school. They're not particularly perturbed about the academic side. They just want to know that we're there to open the school. So those principles actually inspire me on a daily basis. So when I go to work now, I think of them, I tap into how they were. I'm really trying to mold quite a few of the things that I do in this new environment based on those unbelievable people who get very little recognition, but a lot of adversity. Also from, the powers that be. Why haven't you done this, do that, so on. They're facing adversity on an ongoing basis. And people hear about it, but I think until you've seen it, until you've been there, until you've sat inside in a principal's office and he looks at you and says, I don't think I can go on.
Sure.
That you have no idea what courage is. I mean, it doesn't take courage to do what I do and what I've done compared to these people. So yeah, for me, it is really looking at people who, in the face of everything that could go wrong, still get up in the morning with a smile on their face and love those children. Yeah, I think they're very good.
Thank you for that powerful introduction. And I'm definitely going to have to circle back to that and unpack that a little further, please. Melvin, thank you. I'd like to say hello to us and just a little bit about yourself and your understanding of what courageous leadership is.
Good evening, Crispin. I'm thrilled and delighted to share this conversation with you. Good evening to everyone in attendance as well. I started my teaching career at a very interesting stage in the history of our country. I started my teaching career in 1995. There was a buzz in South Africa. I graduated from university, started at what we used to call Model C schools. Our school was very involved with the Rugby World Cup at that stage. So there was a tremendous buzz, a sense of the dawn of a new democracy, the beginning of a new story for our country. So very exciting times when I started my teaching career. I was qualified as a history and high school guidance, a guidance counselor, ended up teaching special needs class at Observatory Junior School. And it's interesting, the principal at that school taught me many lessons about what real leadership looks like. I'll speak about his example during this conversation, but really a tremendous introduction as to how schools should be led by a person. I spent some time in at the school, about 10 years. I traveled to the United States, did a master's program in counseling, and then came back to South Africa. That's interesting. Some of the Americans were saying to me, "You're going back to that lion's den." And I said, well, I'm up for the challenge. South Africa needs me. I love the country. I'm passionate about our country. And then I left education or the teaching scene. I joined the legislature, was responsible, managed the public education and outreach department. I was the project leader on many of the commemorative events. Another very pivotal experience in my leadership training, as it were. I'll speak to that as we go along as well. And currently, I'm engaged in an education and psychology private practice, and I'm also currently working on a PhD program. My understanding of courageous leadership, and I've seen it both in action in education at schools, but also in the provincial legislature. My understanding of courageous leadership is not necessarily somebody who's bold and audacious. I've seen people who are timid, if you will, people who are non-aggressive, really demonstrate courageous leadership. They are willing to do things differently, do the same things, but do it differently in a dynamic way. And for me, that really showed character. And I associate character with courageous leadership. Able to do something, even if it's going against the grain, even if it's going against the norm. I'll speak to examples during this conversation as well. There's a particular school that I'd like to reference where I really saw courageous leadership in the midst of conflict, in the midst of a hostile, indifferent environment. This principal took a stand and led the school, as it were, out of the desert into a functioning, well-organized school. So for me, courageous leadership is not necessarily the most aggressive, the most eloquent person even. It's just somebody who's willing to do the same job, but to do it differently and to do a great job of it.
Thank you. Thank you. So if I can just hook what you were both were sharing. So what I'm hearing is, yes, it's not necessarily the bombastic, loud, in your face kind of individual or leader. But Desiree, if I hear what you were saying and you, Melvin, it's the person who shows up. It's the leader who actually shows up, and they're there, warts and all, and with everything, but they show up. And when you mentioned about the school principal that looks at you and says, I don't know how much longer I can do this, yet tomorrow they show up.
Yeah.
They're there. And Melvin, to your point, they are tackling complex issues, and sometimes in different ways, but sometimes also, I think, probably feeling very lonely and isolated as they do that. And I just want to hook back to two words you used, Melvin, and that's the word character, and how important character is in terms of understanding what it is and who I am as a leader. And the other word you used was that I show up consistently. I'm always there. I'm always in the process and in the act and in my day-to-day grind, but I'm there. And I'm just wondering, as I'm just reflecting on what you've both shared, is how easy it is sometimes just to give up. How easy it is sometimes is to say, I'm out of here. This is bigger than me, or I don't see myself doing this much longer. And yet I'm hearing you talk about really great examples of leaders who have not said that and not done that. Desiree, if I can hook back, please, to your doctoral studies. You did a phenomenal piece of work, and I read your dissertation, and it touched me very deeply in many ways, and it opened up for me angles of looking at a situation and a reality that I hadn't thought, one could look at something like that. And in particularly, and forgive me, this is a layperson's interpretation of your work, was the importance of leadership, but the role that leaders play in the motivation and the energy of people that are in the school system on a day-to-day basis. Just unpack that for us a little, please, and just what some of the key themes or learnings that came out of your study. And if you can circle back to how you introduced courageous leadership, just hook that back there for us, please. Because sorry, where I'm going with the question is the school principal is an individual, but there's a cadre of people that make things happen, or not.
No, absolutely. Yeah. So, you know, I started my thesis basically because I was working in previously disadvantaged areas. So as a white South African, you can read, you could see some things, but it was always from afar, if I can put it that way. And suddenly I was, the first school that I went to, I got to the school, and as I drove in on I mean, you drive up to the school gate and it's rubble and people walking around in pajamas and whatever in the streets. Got to the school gate, drove in, it's just gravel, dirt, mounds of all sorts of things. And I thought, oh, okay. And then, so at every school when I started, I said, show me your school. So I can get I needed to see what it was really like. And I walked around this particular school. When I got to the children's bathrooms, I just said, I can't even go in. That's how bad they were. There were no toilet stalls, there were no toilet seats, and it was disgusting. And it was an acting principal at the time. And I said to him, why do you stay? And he said, these are my people. I don't understand it at all. You know, how can the filth that I'm seeing be your people, if that makes sense? But anyhow, because as I was leaving that day, I had 3 little grade 2 boys. Now I'm a high school trained person, and it's my first real experience with primary school. These 3 little grade 2 boys ran up to me and said, teacher, come play on. And so there was me in my work suit, high heels, running around after 3 little boys. And of course, I had to be on. So after 10 minutes, I said, I've got to go. And those faces, and all I can remember thinking is, why have they got less? And that's what prompted my study. And then you start delving deeper. But the very big thing that came out that I thought that I hadn't considered at all was relationships. And of course, relationships take various forms. But what was most binding was the relationships the principals had with the teachers with the principals, with the parents, you know, with the children. And that they might not be good teachers, but they still feel that there's some kind of relationship. And one of the participants said to me, but they make me feel important. So, you know, I feel important, so I show up and I come back every day. But from a leadership point of view, those principals have to build relationships with parents, with gangsters, with people that they wouldn't want to normally associate with, but if they don't, they alienate people around them. So looking at the relationship aspect, it was absolutely phenomenal for me that, so we're not necessarily friends. On the A staff, there could be, say, 20 people, and they don't like each other. They fight with each other all day long until another person, an outsider, comes and says, there's something wrong here. And they stand together, and they will defend the principal in the same way that the principal will defend them. And I thought that was rather amazing. The only thing is it then binds them into the school. And so we're here, we don't have to do anything, but we're not going anywhere. So that comes in that whole working for a salary. Then the context that the schools were in. not all the schools, some schools, I mean, you can go to the leafy suburbs, as they call it, and find wonderful, wonderful school, you know, buildings and context and everything, and teachers who don't talk to each other and don't work together. So the context doesn't necessarily play a role in making a good school. But what I found was that the context makes some people believe that I'm associated with this context, so there's nowhere else for me to go. So I may as well just stay here. And so there are many of the teachers I came across who, I grew up here, I went to study, I came back, and this is where I'm at. And I'm not going anywhere else. So this is how it is. And these are my people, and these are the ones who accept me, and I'm important. But on the other hand, they also believe that other people looking in will say, well, if you work under those conditions, there's no way you can come here and be a good teacher. But that's perceptions. And I say, but you've got so much you can offer. And they say, no, they will never employ me. So, you know, reasons that they stay. And then the whole salary thing is quite important because they earn a teacher salary, which we all know is not fantastic. However, if everybody around you is unemployed, your salary is amazing as a teacher. So they are elevated in their societies because they've got a car, you know, they've got a house, things like that. So that was very, very interesting. And then, of course, the demands of the education department, who takes absolutely, and by education department, I mean across the board, whether it's provincial or district or national, there's no sort of leeway for the context of a school or the situation the school finds itself in. So I mean, there's CAPS, and CAPS is fantastic because it's fantasy to think that it's ever going to work in an unequal education system like we have. They brought in the ATPs with the COVID situation. It was a great opportunity, actually, for them to say, let's put it aside and let's focus on reading and literacy and so on. But they didn't. So the sad thing is that regardless of what school you're in or your context or whatever the circumstances, with the CAPS and the ATPs, everybody has to perform at the same level. So we demand the same of everybody, and then we say, you know, we slap principals on the wrist who are not getting great systemic results. But if you take their raw material, what they're working with versus another school's raw material, if I can put it that way, I mean, that must be demoralizing. And yet these people go back and they try something new and so on. And then the biggest finding for me, again, as a white South African, you can't experience apartheid for somebody else. You can't understand, you know, the depth of it. And I think that for me, that long shadow of apartheid was, I think, the hardest thing to understand and to acknowledge. And it actually weighed heavy on me for a very long time during my study, because it hurt, you know, that people were still living apartheid, but they are living it. Nothing has changed for so many of those communities. So the principal plays such a pivotal role in trying to uplift those communities, but they don't understand that there's something to uplift too. And, you know, how these people, these principals and the teachers keep at it and keep trying. It's just amazing. So, yeah, I just found that my study, it was quite depressing on the one hand, because you so much hope. Education is the hope, you know, that for the future, and yet it's not really there. So yeah, for people of color in this country, largely, very little has changed since 1994. So yeah, that was what came out of my study. And the leaders, they are, I mean, these are amazing people. You know, as I say, they get up every day. They try to pick up. They try to make better. And I admire them. I admire all of them.
So I want to circle back to two things, please. Desiree, just for the sake of those on the call, you did your PhD, what's it, 2022, 23?
I graduated last year, but I started it when COVID hit.
Okay, so that's what, 2020?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's 30 years post-apartheid, and yet it came up so what's the word I'm looking for? So clearly that is still you call it the long shadow.
Yeah, long shadow of apartheid.
Yeah. I'd like to just understand that a little better, please. But then I also want to circle back to the comment you made that school principals were able to build those deep, meaningful relationships, or able to shift their system in a way.
Yeah.
How are they doing that? Is it their character? Is it their personality? Is it who they are? Or are they doing something specific that others are not doing that enables that?
Yeah. I think where they're getting it right is it's all those things you mentioned about the character and so on. But what I find with I'm thinking of a few principals in particular that I worked with. There was no arrogance. It's not a case of I'm the principal, which very often happens. So I've arrived. Go ahead and do what I tell you to do. These are hands-on people. So, one of the comments made by a teacher about one of these principals was, doesn't matter where you go, he's there. And they love that. So on the one hand, I've got to do things the right way, because if I turn my back, the principal will be there. But also at the same time, they knew that if they needed him, he had their back. And, that's it. So it's not necessarily we're friends. I'm not talking about that kind of a relationship. It is, I think it is protection, in that they felt safe in the environment with their leaders. And then sometimes that would also be a deputy or a departmental head that they were looking up to be that safety net for them. But the relationships came through very, very strong.
And I would imagine that feeling safe with you as my leader takes on a very different meaning in the context that you were describing than in a corporate reality where psychological safety may have a different meaning and reality.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's pretty profound. And I'm trying to just also still wrap my mind around the long shadow of apartheid. Because I was actually sharing your work with somebody the other day, and they said, but it's impossible. It's impossible that 30 years later we still are having this conversation.
It's sad, but it's true.
Yeah. Sure. Folks, use the chat box, please. Come in and if there are questions and something that's just resonating with you and spinning in your mind, as you can see it's happening for me, please just pop it in there. Melvin, you're kind of in a different space in terms of you were in education, you were a teacher, you're in a different role now, you're adding value in a different way, almost outside in, if that makes sense. Just share your world with us, please. What's happening in your space? What are you seeing as some of the critical touch points and realities unfolding in education? And just what are some things you're seeing leaders struggle with, if I may use that term?
Yeah, I'd just like to add a footnote to the comments made by Desiree. We still have here in South Africa and the Western Cape in particular, we have the legacy, the infrastructure legacy of apartheid.
Yeah.
And yet there's a psychological legacy of what apartheid did to people. And I think that goes unnoticed. It's not seen, the psychological damage. It's not seen. And so people assume that it's not there. And I think that to a large degree irks a lot of people, particularly on the Cape Flats. They try to explain that apartheid wasn't just an event that happened, but that it left long-standing psychological scars on these folks. I had a conversation with my dad a few years ago, and I had a meeting with a friend in Harfield Village. And I said to him, I'm meeting a friend in Harfield Village. a Caucasian friend, and he said to me, my grandparents lived in that road where I had the meeting with his friend, and I related the story to my friend, and she was extremely sad because of that legacy of forced removals. They were removed from that community to the Cape Flats, and the long-lasting psychological scars that it left. I think it's something that is it goes unnoticed, but the pain remains. So even in the private practice, I see the effects of this ecosystem spilling over into people's personal lives. I work with children, with learners, I work with educators, and I work with principals. And it's very interesting to see how the current ecosystem impacts people on a psychological level. In South Africa, the South African Society for Psychiatrists of Psychiatrists in South Africa say that 1 in every 10 teenage deaths in South Africa is through suicide. And I mention that for a particular reason. I've been seeing a few teenagers who has been struggling with suicide and suicidal ideation. Suicidal ideation meaning suicidal thoughts. And many of their difficulties relate to what happens in the school environment. Okay, the issue of bullying, the issue of image, shaming, what is commonly known on social media. There's a sense of self-loathing, a sense of discontent, and children develop this huge sense of insecurity, which leads to suicidal ideation and even teenagers executing or leading to suicide. And so there's a growing psychological impact that the school environment has on children, very concerning, that I noticed, and this is part of my PhD research, is teacher mental health. I'm looking at how does the environmental factors, particularly on the Cape Flats, influences teacher mental health. And what I find, the literature shows that teacher mental health is not only a global difficulty, but particularly on the Cape Flats, with many of the elements that Desiree referred to, is leading to a growing number of educators presenting with depression, anxiety, suicide, suicidal ideation, and burnout. And it all relates to difficulties with leadership, very interestingly. It all relates to difficulties. Principals who are not empathic at all, principals who are one-dimensional, principals who do not understand the impact of mental health. I remember people see mental health as they cannot see the effect of it in a physical sense, right? When you break your leg, you go to a doctor and people can see you have a cast, you had a broken leg, and so forth. If you have a mental breakdown, people cannot see that. And to the untrained eye, it's impossible for you to see what this person is experiencing. And so typically clients who see me, teachers, say, principal simply says, just man up, get over it. And I think that's essentially comes down to poor leadership, quite frankly. True leaders understand the people. They understand that our human nature requires more than just taking care of our physiology. It requires us to look at the whole person globally, holistically. But very interesting, what I also saw in the practice is principals consulting with me and principals needing support and guidance in a therapeutic session. And very often they say to me, it's very hard for me to speak to anyone because people don't understand my role as the leader. They don't understand the challenges that I'm experiencing. And so it's very hard and it's very lonely going through this journey. And through a process of therapy and counseling, I allow them to become vulnerable. And I don't see vulnerable as weakness. I see vulnerable as an opportunity to candidly look at what are the challenges that I as a leader, what are those challenges that I'm struggling with? And very often people say to me, this is profoundly helpful, that I'm able to speak to somebody in a candid, honest way about my fears, my concerns, the fact that I'm lonely many times, the fact that I do not always have an answer, the fact that I'm overwhelmed, by circumstances. Remember, the principal, in a sense, is the glue that keeps the school connected to the education department. So he's got the parents, the governing body, and the learners, but he's also got the education department on the other end. So the middle point, as it were, of that whole ecosystem. And I find that principals who go through a process of therapy and counseling and allow themselves that sense of vulnerability, they have a greater sense of compassion for their educators. They have a greater sense of humanness, in a sense. There's an Afrikaans word, I know there might be some English-speaking people, but there's an Afrikaans word that really describes it for me. Die menselijkheid. If you have a sense of menselijkheid, if you have a sense of humanity, and understand that people go through challenges in life, and in our current society in South Africa, we have teachers who deal with learner difficulties. We have teachers who, quite honestly, deal with gender-based violence at home. And it impacts their mental health, it impacts their ability to teach. And if we have leaders who are not sensitive to these matters, it creates an environment where teachers feel unsafe. They feel, I cannot really express myself. And they go to school not with a sense of passion, a sense of joy for the job, because of the limited level of understanding. And I think when leaders allow themselves to be vulnerable, to look at their own struggles, their own difficulties in a meaningful way, it gives them a greater sense of compassion for their educators. And it creates a sense, it creates an environment where teachers feel safe. It creates a safe space. I referred to my first school principal earlier, and he was not a taskmaster. He was not a demanding principal, but he expected the job to be done. But he had a tremendous sense of understanding of what people might experience. And so there was a regular consultation with educators, checking in with them. Are you doing okay? Are you well? Do you need anything? He would never throw you under the bus. He would never place you in a position of difficulty, but come alongside you, as it were, and walk a journey with you. And people would literally go to war with this man. They would work extended hours beyond the school day, because this man is not only about the business of education, but he's about the business of people. And how do we manage people in a meaningful way and create a safe ecosystem, to use your word, for people to flourish as teachers, so that they become better at teaching the learners and creating a safe community all involved. And so those are some of the observations I make in the practice. Very often having people in education consulting with me with their difficulties.
Thank you. And yeah, it's lovely to hear, because, just as I think about what you're just sharing, and I'll come back to Keith's question in the chat box just now. We're finding that true for many leaders, Melvin, not just in education, across the board. Leaders who are really saying, I need access to somebody that can just come alongside me, connect with me, understand my reality, and help me figure out where to and what to and how I can move forward with that. And leaders would do that and open themselves up for those opportunities. We call it a wisdom guide. You called it something else, but it's just this person that's alongside me and under my wing and can just help me get new perspective, new insights, new understanding, in a way that I feel safe and not judged and not criticized, and it's okay then to be vulnerable. Desiree, I see you have responded to Keith's question. Keith's question was, how do you advise? You just want to add to that? And then Melvin, Keith asked, to what extent does mental wellness, this whole reality, contribute to the mental wellness of teachers? And I have a sense you've kind of addressed that in a way already. Desiree, anything you want to add to what you posted there for Keith?
Not really. But what I found out, to just tag on to what Melvin's saying. So that relationship that I'm talking about is very much where the principal still is the principal, their deadlines, all of those things, because as I mentioned, there's the bureaucracy aspect. But when the principal goes alongside a teacher, don't make a song and dance, but just how can I help you go alongside? And then Keith's in here, I didn't realize that he was going to be, but Keith's part of the Principals Academy. And as a principal, I was very, very fortunate to have somebody from the Principals Academy, Anne van Sale, who did that for me. So she would often, her visits weren't, Desiree, try this, try that. It was an opportunity to sort of unpack, because you mentioned it earlier, it's a very lonely job to be the principal, because you can't just go and say, whatever you want, oh, that teacher drove me mad today, kind of thing. But there must be somebody that you could do that with, which ties in with the mental wellness. That does help. But, I think, in fact, one of my colleagues who was a circuit manager with me had a heart attack on Saturday. Healthy man, no blood pressure issues and whatever. Chatted to him yesterday, and he said the pressures of what he's expected to do as a circuit manager. And then, of course, I'm in a school again, and I know what I have to do. Luckily, I've got the other side experience and can get it done, and I'm in a small school and all of those things. But the bureaucratic demands are actually unbelievable and unrealistic, not taking into account that there's a school actually happening, which I think makes things very difficult. So for some principals, I think it's very difficult to make that shift. I've got to do this heavy admin load. I've got to take care of the ill-disciplined children, and we all know about that. And just a comment that I made, wrote down here when you were talking, Melvin, is the children, I mean, I'm at a primary school with grade 1 to 4 children only. They play fight, but I remember seeing that when I was working as a circuit manager. So their playing is fighting. And then if I say, stop fighting, we're not fighting, we're playing. But 5 minutes later, someone's somebody, and so that kind of, these children, that's what they live. They play what they live, and that's, so they're bringing this into the school, which is incredibly demoralizing when you're trying to develop and trying to teach good manners and all the good things that we're supposed to be doing as teachers. So yeah, the bureaucracy is stifling, but there's a lot of hope.
So as we start steering to the close, and just to recap where we started, our theme is around hope and leaders who are dealers of hope and catalysts of hope and custodians of hope. And both of you mentioned examples of school principals who actually are, in spite of everything we were sharing and the ecosystem they find themselves in, are turning things around. So could I ask you, just as you look to the future and you think about leadership, could you share with us some examples, real examples of one or two of those principles you mentioned, Desiree, that actually are beacons of hope in their school and in their community? And Melvin, in your case too, perhaps. And then if you could, with that, just what's your message to us on the call? I mean, we're not all in education. Some of us are in the corporate world and that. But the lessons are there to be learned. So just share one or two examples of leaders who've actually just are those beacons of hope, how they get that right, what they do, and what would be some lessons that you can share with us from their experience and even from your own, please.
So that question has made me think of two particular principles. The one, his school literally is sort of the corner where four gangs, different gangs meet, and you know what happens when they meet. But the school is in a seriously dangerous area. The area around the school is seriously poverty-stricken. There's no service delivery, so you can imagine what it looks like. But he went and he actually approached the leaders at the school and around the school.
Okay.
And he said to them, your children attend the school. Leave the school alone. And they all agreed to leave school alone. So there is an understanding that while you're at school, nothing will happen around the school. But the incredible thing is you can go to, I often used to say to people, you can go and eat off the bathroom floor there. No one would. but that school is clean. So outside, there's rubble, there's, what do they call the plastic bags, the Cape Rose or whatever they call it. That's all around the school. But in the school, the children do not litter. They do not scribble on things. The school is incredible. And the children love him, teachers love him, but again, he has very, very serious boundaries. This is how it's going to be. And the people do it. So he's on the one hand. And there's a huge sense of pride there. And then the other principle that I thought of, he realized that his children can't read. And part of why the children don't read and can't read is because the parents don't read and can't read. So he decided to invite the parents to come to his school. So they would come twice a week, parents, grandparents, who was available. And he started off with the children reading to the parents and then saying, okay, now parents, it's time for you to read. So he had an incredible literacy program going at his school in an informal way. And I mean, people like that, they just, they inspire me to do things and to be better. So, and both of them, you meet them, they're these unassuming, quiet, wonderful people, and that always gives me a sense of hope.
Beautiful.
And while they are stuck in the bureaucracy, they also realize their school and their children cannot, they don't meet that. The caps is too much for them. So although they abide by what they have to, they also change things up so that they can achieve what they need to achieve. Very impressive people.
Beautiful. Wow.
Yeah.
Love to meet people like that, really. It's just awesome. And if you could extract a lesson from that, what if you had to just share with us, what is the one leadership lesson you can extract from those two examples?
For teachers specifically and leaders, don't let the demands of bureaucracy stop you from doing what you know works to ensure that learners learn to read and write, read with meaning and be able to write, and to bring positive change not only to the school, community, the country as a whole.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Melvin? Your stories of hope?
Yeah, I'd like to relate a story about school in Mitchell's Plain, school called West End Primary, a school in a very troubled, difficult community, a community synonymous with violence, drugs, gangsterism, a community with tremendous socioeconomic difficulties. A school that was really in the trenches, as it were. And a principal came to the school and he had a vision, but he also had something called conviction. He realized that this project is not about me. This project transcends me as an individual. And the school became a top 20 school in the world. Celebrated by the Premier of the Western Cape. Alan Windy went to the school, celebrated this tremendous feat. So the school became a safe haven for the learners. They transformed the school, they cleaned up the school, and I believe a clean school sets the tone for learning. I believe that. I truly believe that. They created a feeding scheme for the learners. Many of the kids come from homes where meals are in short supply. They provided a literacy program for kids after school. They provided computer training courses and a host of other events. He transformed the school from a struggling school to a well-functioning school in that ecosystem. Now, he understood that this project is not about me. It's not driving my agenda. It's not driving my own interest, but it's driving what is important for the collective. And that for me was a tremendous lesson. And then I look at schools in the same area who are struggling because the leader is caught up in his own personality, his own ego. It's about me. It's about the way I do things. And Clive Arris at West End had a different approach. His approach was, how do I harness, how do I leverage what I have as a leader to benefit not only the school community, but the community at large. The school is doing tremendously well. It's a place where children look forward to go to. I mean, how many kids look forward to go to school? But at West End, he's developed a sense of pride in the school. And the one of the key lessons that I learned from this man is he leads by example. There is a profound effectiveness in leading by and through example. He does the work when everybody else is sleeping, as it were. As Max Dupree says, do the hard work while others are sleeping. And he's created a sense of pride in the school amongst learners and educators. People are proud to be part of West End. And I think it's a tremendous example of what true courageous leadership can bring about. He has compassion for his educators. He understands mental health. He understands his own mental health and taking care of that. But he gets the job done. And through the compassion he demonstrates with others, people will literally go to war with him. And I think that is a great lesson for us. It's a great lesson for other schools in that communities. You have schools in the same road, as it were, who are struggling because the leadership style is different. And so leaders who have powerful results, wonderful results, take people along there with them. It's not about me driving this process. It's not about me taking the credit for everything. It's about acknowledging what people do. It's about saying this project goes beyond a personality. It's a collective effort, and I'm simply a vehicle to lead this process. I have tremendous respect for him. He empowers his educators. He gives them scope to grow and to develop. I think that's what a leader does. A leader is not preoccupied with himself, but he leads others. He allows opportunities and platforms for people to grow and develop themselves as people. Just a wonderful leader, a leader who's not averse to change, a leader who embraces change. And really, the final word on this particular example, he understands that all wisdom and knowledge doesn't reside with him. He understands when I go into a meeting, I need the input from others. That's how we make this project better. I think that is tremendous example and encouragement. West End Primary, great school, great leader.
Thank you. So Desiree, Melvin, thank you so much, because what you did this evening was you opened up the curtain and allowed us into your world in a real way. And thank you for doing that, and thank you for being open and honest and real about what's really happening and what the challenges are. But I have a deep respect too for what it is that you are doing in your spaces and circles of influence to bring hope and to bring an alternative into those realities. And thank you for sharing those beautiful stories of hope, which leaves me with a sense of it's possible. It doesn't have to be the way it is now forever. We can make it change. We can change it. We can make a difference. We can turn it around. And when we met on that Easter Monday and started thinking about today, I think you both left me feeling that there is hope. There is an answer. It's yes, it's real, and all these things are there, but it's not the end of the world. And there's a bright future. But we need the kind of leaders that you are and what you bring, and we need the kind of leaders that you were sharing with us that are out there. And we need more of them, more of them, and more of them, and more of them. So thank you so much. I'm deeply moved by your stories. I'm deeply moved by your own sense of purpose and commitment and your own sense of hope. And thank you for touching me in that way. As we pull to an end or pull to a close, and as we wrap up, Desiree, if this was your last conversation on this topic, what would your final message be to the world out there, to the education sector out there, to leaders across the globe out there. And Melvin, while Desiree's sharing that gives you a minute or two to think about the same question, please. What's your final message? If you had one last opportunity to share a message to leaders out there, what would that message be?
I think my pet peeve is when you listen to the news and wherever, is education needs to fix this. They should be taught at school. Everything must happen at school. I think that if education can be used for education, not just schooling, but for proper education, and not to solve the socioeconomic problems, political problems, and every other kind of problem that is out there, and give teachers, principals, an opportunity to really teach, and also not to look fancy because you got a tick box and you did well in the tick box thing. I think that allowing real teachers, because those with a true calling, teachers know what is required to get a child to read and write, and with meaning and all of those things that Paul's been talking about forever. Let education educate.
Do its thing, yeah.
And stop trying to make it. I mean, I heard the comment about education has always been the political football. Well, cut it out. Yeah.
Thank you. Melvin, your final message to us on the call and to leaders out there.
Yeah, look, I worked in the legislative sector, seen how things work from that perspective. Change is not necessarily going to come from the government, quite frankly. It's going to come from the ground up. It's going to come from ordinary teachers, ordinary principals in communities, ordinary people who desire extraordinary things. I think when we create, as in the words of John Maxwell, the 360-degree leader, create an environment in your classroom, create an environment in your school where learners feel safe, where learners feel empowered, where you grow and develop yourself as an educator, impart wisdom and knowledge to children. The same with principals. As a leader, there's a saying that goes, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. If you care as a leader, you take people along a very long journey with you. And so change is not necessarily going to come from the state, but I think it's ordinary people who will make changes in South Africa.
Thank you. Desiree, thank you. Appreciate you. Thank you so much. Melvin, likewise, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing so authentically, so vulnerably, so truthfully. And to those of you on the call, thank you so much for joining us for tonight's episode. For me, it's been thought-provoking. It's been an incredible opportunity just to sit at your feet, Desiree, Melvin, and learn from you. So thank you so much to everybody. And we'll be communicating back to you as soon as we can in terms of our next episode for Leaders in Conversation. And please spread the message of hope. And don't tell the world these stories you heard this evening about leaders who really are having a profound impact in their communities. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening. Goodbye.